topic 5.9, we're discussing mining as a practice, a land use practice. And so the process of mining is basically extracting from the earth ores which contain concentrated accumulations of valuable metals or products that humans are seeking. And so it could be mining for lithium mining or copper mining, coal mining, diamond and gold mining. So basically anything valuable from the earth can be mined or extracted. And there are various ways that mining practices can take place, and different types of mining result in different impacts to the earth. And so mining, the way that mining works is typically across the globe, the most accessible ores where you can get at these valuable materials the easiest, those are the first to be exploited. But as those materials are depleted, because they're finite, there's a limited amount of all of these materials in the Earth's crust. So as they're depleted, more and more resources are required to obtain this limited resource. And oftentimes more energy is required. Different locations need to be found. You need to go deeper into the earth to get these materials, as the more easily accessible materials are exploited. And so the exploitation, the mining of these products, it results in different types of pollution that are associated with mining. It impacts the ecosystem by disrupting the topography of the area depending on the type of mining. If I tell you to imagine a coal mine, what I'm going to guess you're going to imagine is, a tunnel deep into the earth, like a Minecraft, one of those little carts going into a track down into the earth, okay? Or a lift that takes miners and equipment down into a mine shaft where coal is mined. Those are processes called subsurface mining. It's basically going under the surface of the earth, basically tunneling under the surface, and then finding these areas of ore. Often they're called seams. A coal seam can be deep within the earth. So you could dig a tunnel to access this seam of coal, and then you can start to dig it out and extract it. And so here in this diagram, we show some of these subsurface mining. So on the left side are the underground mining methods. What we see here is, a shaft mine where you dig down vertically into the earth, and then you start to tunnel horizontally, extracting the coal from this area. Typically, you leave pillars of coal to support the surface above. Another type of subsurface mining we see here is a slope mine, where rather than a vertical tunnel, it's dug at an angle, but it works in basically the same way. Or you can go horizontally in the surface of sort of a hillside or mountain to access those coal seams. And those are types of underground subsurface mining. But after another form of mining is called surface mining. And so surface mining is used to remove large portions of the surface from the top down, large areas of soil, large areas of rock, which we call overburden, to get to the ore that's below that. So if we look at this this is the original surface of this mountain. One way of doing it is called mountaintop removal, where you basically strip away the top of this mountain and you access these seams of coal. But of course, you're going to be left over with large amounts of this material that's unwanted. These are called mine tailings or mine spoils, right? And this waste material, it's not needed. It has very little or no valuable minerals in it, but something has to be done with it. We could see here the rock spoil is being sort of just deposited here. Here we can see more of those mine spoils or those tailings that are here. And so those have to be disposed of. They can erode off of the surface if there's large amounts of precipitation. And they often contain contaminated materials. And so we can see this is mountaintop removal. And there's other surface mining. There's strip mining, where you dig strips of land away from these areas. You dig into the land. And so we could see some of these pictures here show surface mining. And what we can see is it radically alters this is pit mining, radically alters the surface. It radically alters the habitat in these areas by displacing this earth. And so what do we mine from the earth? Well, lots of things. Lots of what we need are iron ore is a huge percent of the ore that is mined. You can see it here. Then there's other sort of metals that we use in industries, right? Aluminum, copper, things like this. And then there's also things like lithium, cobalt. These are found in very low quantities. They're called rare earth elements sometimes, but these are increasingly important because they are required for batteries and electronics. And so we need more and more of these rare earth metals as we increasingly shift to battery-powered electric vehicles and computers become widespread. They need many of these materials, which are in relatively limited quantities in the Earth's crust. Here we can see some examples in the United States of where we mine things. And so let's look at the green dots. These are coal mines. So coal is very abundant in Appalachia. You can see this down the Appalachian Mountains here. Lots of coal mines. And much of the most easily accessible coal has been extracted. Right? There's even, if you ever travel south on Route 81 into Pennsylvania, there's a museum, the Anthracite Museum, I believe it's called, because that's a type of coal. And there is an amusement park in a museum basically to the coal industry. And again, this coal industry was very manual. It was very labor intensive, and many individuals that were working these coal, they were well-paying jobs, but they were extremely hazardous to the health of the workers. And many times the inhalation of coal dust led to black lung disease and types of cancer that were very common in these parts of the country where coal mining was a dominant industry. We also know that this is also where the manufacturers of opioids like OxyContin, the opioid epidemic, you could think of, really took hold in this area because there were so many workplace-related injuries related to mining and other physical careers and jobs, that there were many times people had serious injuries from working in these industries, and the manufacturers of OxyContin, Purdue Pharma, actually targeted these areas for widespread adoption of these opioid painkillers, and at the same time hid the addictive nature of them. And there's a lot more detail you could get into if you want to understand the opioid epidemic and its link to this part of the world. And there's a great book, if you're interested in nonfiction, called Dope Sick, that kind of talks about this, the start of the opioid epidemic and how it ties into some of these concepts. There's also other, metal mines. There's sand and gravel, which is mined in many, many parts of the country. There's metal that's mined in various places, and stone, etc. But we can see mining operations are present in many different parts of the United States. And so we need these resources. We need these resources to maintain our standard of living and to fuel sort of our technological revolution. But they have serious impacts. Obviously, habitats can be destroyed by these surface mines. Heavy metals that are present in these ores often can leach into the groundwater. Heavy metal is toxic to organisms, and so if it leaches into groundwater, it can be very dangerous. A lot of these ores contain sulfur, and when that sulfur is mined and it's in the tailings that are deposited around the mine area, it leads to what's called acid mine drainage. Those sulfur compounds, when they're exposed to air and water, they form sulfuric acid. And as that acid leaches into soil and surface waters, what happens is it can dissolve heavy metals like lead, arsenic, and mercury, and they can then contaminate ecosystems. They can get into drinking water. They can get into ecosystems, which is very dangerous. Also, as the more easily accessible resources are depleted, it's harder and harder to access this material, so it takes more resources. It's more expensive. And it's also dangerous work, as we talked about. The inhalation of these small particles that come from mining is very dangerous. Mines often have inside of them radioactive gas, which can lead to various health effects. Also, many of the deposits of these rare earth metals are in developing countries, where environmental and safety regulations may not be as prominent as they are in developed countries. And so the developing world and people working in those conditions are bearing the brunt of the health effects and the environmental effects of the developed world's need for many of these resources.